Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lorella Praeli, Director of Immigration Policy and Campaigns for the American Civil Liberties Union. Thank you so much for joining today's call. Nearly 5 years ago, many huddled across the country to watch President Obama's announcement of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals DACA program, which was the product of years of organizing, advocacy, storytelling, and in many cases, heartbreak. Now, 5 years later, approximately 780,000 dreamers across this country get to live their lives with a little bit more certainty, with the ability to work, drive, and continue contributing to their community, a certainty that is now threatened. Although Trump and DHS Secretary Kelly have repeatedly said they're not targeting DACA recipients and that they should, quote, rest easy, there is something deeply unsettling about the cases that are coming to light which tell a much different story. We are aware now of a handful of cases where ICE and CBP agents have targeted DACA recipients, including Jessica Colotl, the focus of today's call. Last month, ICE arbitrarily revoked Jessica's DACA, justifying their action by falsely claiming she had a felony conviction. They have now admitted that she does not have a conviction for immigration purposes, but they have yet to reinstate her DACA, and she's at serious risk of detention and deportation. So I wanted to provide a little bit of background about what has happened and why this call is so urgent. And we have a great lineup of speakers who have joined us today, and they are as followed. Congressman Gutierrez, a longtime champion on immigration issues. Jessica Colotl, an activist and dreamer whose DACA status was arbitrarily revoked by the Trump administration. Michael Tan, a staff attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union Immigrants' Rights Project. Claudia Acosta, who's Jessica's sorority sister. And Grayson Martinez, the advocacy director with United We Dream and a DACA recipient herself. So with that, I'll turn it over to the congressman, and I just want to flag that he's only able to join us for the beginning of the call, but if anyone has any follow-up questions, we're happy to connect them to his office. Congressman Gutierrez.
Lorella, thank you. I'm really sad that we have to come together to talk to one another today. And I want to thank United We Dream and Jessica, frankly, the person we're here all for today. And I just want to put her fight in perspective. We're going to celebrate the 5th anniversary on June 15th, the day the president announced. A lot of work went into that announcement, getting him to take that executive authority, that executive action that day. And this coming August will be 5 years since the first. Look, they came forward. They provided the government with their fingerprints. They went through a thorough background check. And what did they get? They got a work permit. They got a Social Security card. They got the ability to work in this country. They didn't get a Pell Grant. They didn't get government assistance. They didn't get a handout. They got the ability to work. And I just think it's shameful that someone like Jessica, who went and worked and studied and now is a professional in our legal community, will be under threat. What happened to people that were doing harm in our community, the quote-unquote bad ones, as they like to refer to them? What happened to going after people that do harm in our community? Well, no, they're coming after Jessica, and it's not the fantasy of mass deportation or making people so miserable that they decide to leave. This is going to happen. 5 to 10 million people aren't just going to pick up and leave, no matter what Trump or Bannon or Sessions say or think. Look, excluding immigrants from society because they lack papers is also a very self-defeating process. Jessica and dreamers like her, look, this is the only country they really know. And all of them have made their lives here. So we owe it to ourselves to take the limits off of their potential and to remove the paper ceiling that holds them back. Because Jessica's American, and she's like my daughters, Omaira and Jessica. That's my second daughter, Jessica. They're just like my daughters. They're American in everything but a piece of paper. My girl's got the piece of paper. We're going to work tirelessly till Jessica gets that piece Don't think of kids anymore. Think of adults. Think of people who are not just working in universities in the kitchens and the dorms or attending classes or getting these wonderful advanced degrees. At this point, DACA recipients, they're researchers, they're professors. I've met people graduating from medical school that are DACA recipients. They're administrators. They're school teachers in my city of Chicago, school teachers. We shouldn't be going around trying to deport people who have done everything the government said they should do and are. And it's not just that they don't represent a threat to our society, they represent a great benefit to our society. You know, Donald Trump met, I'm thinking here a moment, he met with the Dreamers during the campaign. I think that absolutely played a role in softening him on Dreamers. But you know what? He's getting a lot too much credit for not abolishing DACA. Yeah, you know, everybody, give Trump credit for not abolishing DACA. Because, in fact, as we're seeing, they're still being targeted. DACA recipients are still being targeted by Trump and Kelly. Secretary Kelly just lied to the Hispanic Congressional Caucus. He lied to the Democratic Caucus. He has lied. He says they're fine, they're safe, and he always tells us how much he's protecting them. Well, here you got a chance, Secretary Kelly, to be true to your word and to what you said. You said that you're fighting for them against others that want to abolish. That's what he told us. Well, you want to know something? Here's your time to step up, Secretary. Because for everybody in this country, this is a settled, established issue. Okay? Everybody knows about DACA and supports it overwhelmingly. And Americans, they want legality and they want accountability in our immigration system. And they reject the mass deportation programs. And they reject that young leaders like Jessica should never be turned away from this country. The only place where deporting Dreamers seems like a good idea, there's a place where it seems like a good idea. You know where deporting Jessica is a good idea? In the far corners of the Republican Party in Congress, in the Oval Office, and in the right-wing media. So, Jessica, I want to thank you and let you know that I will stand by you. I'm a phone call away. I know there are other colleagues that will stand by you to protect you and others. And I want to say that it's an honor to stand with the ACLU. And thank you to the ACLU. And thank you to United We Dream and so many others that are doing so much to stand up. Again, it makes me sad to have to be on this phone call because I know the threat Jessica's under. But at the same time, I'm proud to be on, and I'm honored to be on this call because we've got to fight for Jessica and other young Americans like her. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on the call, and God bless and speed to all of you.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm now going to turn it over to Jessica, who is a dreamer from Georgia. Jessica?
Hi, good afternoon. Once again, my name is Jessica. And start off, I was completely shocked when my DACA was revoked from me for no reason whatsoever. Just to give some background information, I came to the United States from Mexico when I was 11 years old, and I've lived my entire adult life in Atlanta. I went to college here and helped found a chapter of a Latin sorority for Latina women. Ever since, I've been involved with other organizations in the community. For example, I also volunteer with the Latin American Association here in Atlanta every year when they host their annual Latino Youth Leadership Conference, and that's held each fall, and it's for hundreds of Latino middle and high school students, parents, teachers, and volunteers who come together to an Atlanta area university for a day-long gathering centered around motivating youth to finish high school and encourage them to go to college. And some of the objectives that we work on include inspiring Latino students to finish high school and pursue college, provide students with the tools and resources they need to access college, develop leadership skills, and learn about different colleges and explore careers. This great program started in 2000, in 2000, and I've been volunteering for this great event every year since 2008, and it's been such an honor to be part of this amazing program that really uplifts the spirit for young students in the community. I have also donated platelets for a hospital in Atlanta, and it's been great knowing that at the end of the day I can save lives for so many people. And even though I don't know a lot of them, I've never had anyone close to me who's gone through cancer. I can just imagine what people go through when they're going through chemotherapy, and it just makes me happy that at the end of the day I can contribute to a bigger cause, and then I'm part of it. Also, as a member of my sorority, I have helped raise funds for the St. Jude Children's Hospital, which has the national philanthropy for the organization. And I've been walking for St. Jude for about 3 years now, raising funds here in Atlanta. Now I'm currently taking a leadership class for this leadership class is to help me get more leadership skills to go to the community and give back, but it's with the Georgia Association for Latino Elected Officials, and I'm so honored that I was accepted into the program, because not everyone who applies to the program gets accepted. So it's a real honor to continue being part of the program, because I know that at the end of the day it'll help me be a stronger leader. And I was very thankful that I was able to do all of that, because I had a work permit that allowed me to get a job and get a driver's license. So of course I was very thrilled when DACA was created, because I knew that I could finally live and work and drive and plan for the future. So like my struggles were behind me, and I was finally able to live a full life in the only country that feels like home for me. And ever since I got DACA, I have been giving back to the community. As I mentioned, I became a paralegal in an immigration law firm, and I'm saving money to go to law school. I would look for other ways to contribute to, when my DACA status was taken away from me, it basically took my life away. It was an arbitrary decision. I had been granted DACA before, and nothing about my circumstances have changed since then. There are about roughly 750 to 780 thousand people like me who have DACA. All of them are feeling scared right now. Their whole lives depend on this program, and they're worried that this could be taken away at any moment. We've heard President Obama said in the past he wouldn't go after dreamers, but from my experience, it feels like a total change of policy, because the administration came after me. And I just want him to protect dreamers the way he promised he would. From the moment he took office, he assured that we could that we as dreamers could rest, and that we shouldn't be worried about this. But that's obviously not true.
Thank you, Jessica. I will now be turning it over to Michael Tan, a staff attorney with ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project, who can speak more about the case in the courts. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the call. So our case in federal district court in Atlanta challenges the Trump administration's arbitrary revocation of Ms. Colotl's DACA. Last month, the government terminated her DACA without any explanation and without giving her a chance to respond. DHS then turned around and announced to the media that it had revoked her DACA because she was supposedly a convicted felon for having provided false information to the police. Specifically, when asked by reporters why her DACA was revoked, ICE spokesman Brian Cox said, and I'm quoting, "Under federal law, her guilty plea is considered a felony conviction for immigration purposes." That charge is completely bogus. Ms. Colotl never gave a false address to the police. She does not have a felony conviction. Instead, she pled not guilty to the false information charge and was ultimately dismissed. And in fact, on May 31st, a few days ago, in its response to our emergency motion for a temporary restraining order, the government conceded that, and I'm quoting from their brief, based on the information available to DHS at this time, the agency's position is that plaintiff's pretrial diversion agreement was not a conviction for immigration purposes. We have those materials, and we're, of course, happy to provide them upon request. So last week, the government admitted in federal court, as it had to, that Ms. Colotl does not have a conviction for immigration purposes. Nonetheless, it's still arguing that she's ineligible for DACA, which she was previously granted twice, because she's supposedly a quote-unquote priority for immigration enforcement. This is absurd. Nothing has changed about Ms. Colotl's facts. She's the same hardworking and productive member of her community that she was when she was granted DACA the first two times. No one could possibly argue that she's an enforcement priority. Nor has anything about the DACA program changed. Ms. Colotl has been forthcoming about everything in her life since she first applied for DACA, and the government has known about her facts all along. The only thing that's changed here is the administration, and the way the government is treating Ms. Colotl flies in the face of President Trump's assurances that DACA recipients are safe from his deportation force. Her case casts serious doubt on whether this administration can be trusted when it says it'll do right by dreamers. Instead of keeping the promise it made Ms. Colotl by granting her DACA, the government has upended her life and targeted her for deportation. So tomorrow, we'll be asking the federal court to enter a temporary restraining order that restores Jessica's DACA and forces the government to give her application for DACA renewal a fair look, without the bogus allegation that she's a convicted felon or somehow otherwise an enforcement priority. In our view, both the laws and the Constitution entitle her to that basic, fair process.
Thank you, Michael. Claudia Acosta, Jessica's sorority sister, has also joined us on the call.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to tell you a little bit about my relationship with Jessica. I met Jessica through my sorority. She had helped start the sorority chapter at her school, Kansas State University. At that time, I was going to a different school. I went to the University of Georgia. After I graduated from UGA, one of her chapter sisters contacted me because she had been arrested for driving without a license. I remember a group of us went to visit Jessica in a detention center in Gadsden, Alabama. Just seeing Jessica there was really shocking. It shook me to my core. It wasn't about the immigration stuff we watch on TV. It wasn't an article that you read online. It was a human being. It was somebody that I knew, dressed in a detention uniform. I was able to see the pain that she was going through at that time. To me, seeing Jessica in a detention center was a life-changing experience. It wasn't fair legally or when it came to the morals of what this country is all about. At that moment, I realized that it wasn't just about Jessica. It was a bigger problem. It was a bigger immigration problem. We contacted Jessica's immigration attorney, and he told us that there's nothing that could have been done at that point, that she just needed to sign her papers for voluntary departure. I still vividly remember the time when I went down to immigration court in Atlanta, Georgia, to her master hearing, and I remember the words of her immigration attorney telling me that there's nothing that could have been done. At that time, we decided just to go for it and to come up with a campaign to get Jessica's story out there. We drafted a press release and sent it to different organizations in Georgia, and we went to an immigration march in Atlanta on May 1st. At this time, DACA wasn't in place, so many people didn't know DACA students.
a lot of students were very afraid to say the word undocumented, and people just didn't talk about it. You wouldn't know who was documented or who wasn't documented. So we decided to come up with a slogan that will say, I march for Jessica, who are you marching for? Because we thought that this whole immigration deal affects everyone. It affects the whole community. I can guarantee you probably know someone going through an immigration issue. You just don't know they're going through it right now. Throughout the years, we developed a friendship. She's a very respected member of our sorority because of who she is as a person. She's very hardworking, humble, and honest. She's an extremely strong person. Everything that she's going through, and she continues to fight for what she believes is right. As I mentioned before, she's an active member in our sorority. She's someone the younger sisters look up to. I have never heard any sorority sisters saying anything bad about Jessica, to me or to anyone. Her situation helped me inspired and to continue with my law school studies until I became an attorney. However, I'm not here to talk to you about Jessica as an attorney, but as a friend. If people only knew Jessica, their view of immigration will completely change. They're attacking people that they don't even know, and they're talking about laws that they don't even know. I'm sure that if people will be able to listen to Jessica's story, and people like Jessica will be sitting down at a table having a more rational, humane talk about immigration reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Gracia Martinez with United We Dream will wrap up the call, and then we'll turn it over to Tony to give instructions for Q&A. Gracia?
Thank you, Lorela. My name is Gracia Martinez Rosas. I am the Advocacy and Policy Director of United We Dream, the largest immigrant youth-led network in the country. Thank you all who joined this call, and thank you, Jessica. Thank you for your courage and your resilience. You inspire me and the members of United We Dream, and United We Dream is proud to stand with you and the ACLU to fight back. Just like you, Jessica, and about 800,000 other young people, I am a beneficiary of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. I am undocumented, and in spite of Trump's best laid efforts, I am still unafraid and here to stay. Today, I'm a leader and a member of United We Dream. Dea Aldaña, a DACA beneficiary herself, went to Capitol Hill and courageously demanded answers from Secretary John Kelly himself on why his agency is targeting DACA recipients like Jessica. And yesterday, another leader from United We Dream, Juan Manuel, looked him in the eye to ask about Jessica and another immigrant youth who should be protected, but find ourselves stalked by agents like what happened to Daniela Vargas, framed by agents like what happened to Daniel Ramirez, or deported by agents like what happened to Juan Manuel Montes. Immigrant youth, we won DACA by telling the truth of what was happening to us. We won by relentless advocacy, by telling our stories and demanding justice. DACA has changed the lives of nearly 1 million young people, and I am living proof of that. Donald Trump has said that immigrant youth has nothing to worry about. Speaker Ryan looked one of our members in the eye and said that immigrant youth would be protected by this president, but here we are. Let's be clear, Jessica got a ticket in her car, just like I have before, just like some of you may have also before. That began a nightmare that no one should endure, being jailed, having her name smeared by vengeful law enforcement officials, and then Trump's agents lying and taking her DACA away. Jessica's life has been turned upside down, and she could be deported. Kelly and Trump, as we know, have appointed a former director of an anti-immigrant hate group as the person who is supposed to help us resolve these problems within the immigration agency. They have unleashed immigration agents without any oversight and are going after immigrant youth and our families who consider this country our home. Jessica should have her DACA reinstated, and the harassment must stop. Immigration agents must be reined in and should stop going after our families, stop going after our communities. With Trump in the White House, immigration agents are running rampant through our communities in a race-based witch hunt, and congressional cowardice in holding Trump administration needs to be held accountable. It is up to the states and local communities to enact policy to keep their residents safe. Our communities are under siege. DACA recipients have more things to worry about. Immigrants and people of color have to watch their backs as they walk down the street now in Trump's America. We demand courage from elected officials. We know that peace and justice for immigrants is possible. We know that justice for Jessica is possible, that Juan Manuel Montes can come back home, that Daniel Ramirez does not have to stay one day away from his child in Washington State, and we will continue to fight until we make that a reality. This is our home. I am here to stay, Jessica's here to stay, and we are ready to ensure that our communities are safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gracia, to you, Jessica, United We Dream, and for all of your efforts across the country, day and night, to make sure that Dreamers and DACA recipients and our undocumented families get to say that we are here to stay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony, who's going to give instructions for Q&A.
Great, thank you. At this time, if you'd like to ask a question, simply press star and 1 on your touch-tone telephone. If your question has been answered and you wish to be removed from the queue, please press the pound key. Again, to ask a question, please press star and 1 now. We'll take our first question from Maria Pena with La Opinion. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Yes, thank you for doing this call. I actually have several questions for different speakers there. So for Michael, I want to make sure that I understand that tomorrow's hearing, the likely scenarios are probably down to two, either having her DACA permit reinstated, or proceeding with deportation proceedings. I want to make sure that those are the two likely scenarios. And so I needed more additional background on what you said about ICE now saying that this was not a felony conviction for immigration purposes, because I read that was their stance as of a couple of weeks ago. And for Congressman Gutierrez, if he's on the line, I needed to know whether you guys, the ones that were opposing the anti-immigrant bills that passed the Judiciary Committee, whether you guys were able to look into whether or not the database that USCIS has on Dreamers is going to be protected from ICE agents. I know that when the bill was being amended, that was a big issue that came up, but it was unresolved, unsettled. And for Gracia or anyone else on the call, if you could give a quick assessment of where DACA stands now, with the upcoming 5th anniversary. My understanding, according to DHS, is that DACA is safe for now, and it's just that people who have convictions may lose the benefit and be placed in deportation proceedings. So I'm sorry, but I just have different questions for different people on the panel. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. This is Michael from the ACLU. I can get started, and then other folks can chime in. So basically, what our case is about is the fact that the government has taken Jessica's DACA away and completely failed to explain 7 years after she was first granted deferred action, and then after she's gotten 2 grants of DACA, the government has completely failed to explain why she's now, today, an enforcement priority and should not be entitled to DACA status. And you're right. Initially, it came out saying that the reason she was an enforcement priority was that she had this supposed felony conviction, that she had been convicted and pled guilty to giving a false address to the police. And that charge is bogus. The government has since been forced to concede in response to our court filings that she has no such conviction. She never gave false information to the police. She pled not guilty, and the charge was dismissed. There is no felony conviction. And nonetheless, the government is still fighting the case. They haven't restored her DACA. They're simply asserting she's still an enforcement priority without explaining what that means. So what we're asking the court to do tomorrow is to restore her DACA and order the government to take a second look, a fair look, at her renewal application, which she had previously submitted earlier this year, without this thumb on the scale, without this bogus charge that she's a convicted felon. And we're fairly confident, given that the facts haven't changed and that the DACA program hasn't changed, that if they give that fair look, her DACA will be renewed as it was once before. So that's really what the case is about.
Okay.
Great. Gracia, do you want to take the advocacy questions?
Yes. Hi, hola, Pilar. So next week we're celebrating the 5th year anniversary of the DACA program, the 5th year that almost 1 million people have been able to change their lives. But we know that victory is threatened and was threatened with the election of Donald Trump. There is no denying that the program is different now with the Trump appointees being in charge of looking it over. And so we see that there is what some will call an erosion of the program when you see cases like Juan Montes being deported, like Daniel Ramirez. And so I think that although the large part of the immigrant youth community that is DACA eligible and that has DACA, like that still stands, there are a lot of questions about the changes that this Trump administration has brought to the program, how they're interpreting the program, and what we're demanding is answers. You can't say in the public that you love us and you assure us easy, and in private have your agents stalk us and deport us and detain us. And so I think that there's questions to the Trump administration, questions to Secretary Kelly, and as well as questions to Speaker Ryan and the Republicans. I think that, they are responsible in large part with the oversight of what's happening in those agencies. And it seems right now that those agents are running out of control and rampant in our communities.
Thank you, Gracia. And just to take your last question, Maria, I don't think that those bills change the confidentiality protections, but the administration could do so administratively. I think that there are questions that we have that we have in light of everything that is unfolding with some of the cases that we're following. Is there an agency-wide review of DACA? Are they using a different standard when they're adjudicating initial requests or renewals? They're saying that nothing has changed, but given what is happening with Jessica, are there things happening in the agency that we're not privy to? And I think those are good follow-up questions for the agency. We're certainly doing our work to try to get answers to those questions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to Julia Preston with the Marshall Project. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, all. Thank you for having this call. Very informative. Can you hear me all right?
And yes. Hi,
yes,
Julia.
Yes. Okay. Hi. So, Michael, I still am not understanding the legal approach here. You are going into federal court, right? You're not in immigration court. You're going into federal district court. So, what exactly is the claim? Is this?
Sure.
Is this? Yeah. And how do you anticipate that the federal court would relate to the immigration court or address itself to ICE and DHS in this case? I'm still not clear on that. And a question also for Gracia, which is these cases that you've mentioned, Daniel Ramirez, the fellow Montes who was deported, are those just high-profile cases where Dreamers and DACA recipients have been deported or threatened with deportation, or do you have numbers of others that we haven't heard about who are also in the same situation?
Sure, I'll go first. This is Michael again from the ACLU. Thanks for your question, Julia. So our case is proceeding independently from Jessica's immigration court proceedings. We have filed suit and sought a TRO, essentially raising two claims. One claim under the Administrative Procedures Act, challenging the revocation of her DACA as arbitrary because, as arbitrary and capricious because it wasn't based on legitimate factors and the facts in the record, and also challenging it as a violation of due process because DHS stripped Jessica of her DACA without providing an explanation of the reasons why it was doing so, and an opportunity to refute those allegations, which she surely would have had she been given that chance, given that she, in fact, does not have a felony conviction. So this is moving separately from anything in immigration court. And in our view, the court is fully, has full authority to, undo what the government has done here and restore Jessica's DACA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Julia. It's so good
Hi.
to hear your voice.
Thank you.
On this question, those cases are examples of what we believe to be things that are happening on the ground. And so, we are still getting a sense of how much the ground has shifted, but we know from some numbers from DHS and USCIS that there are DACA recipients that are currently detained. There's 90 of them. There's some that have been removed, which are 408. I mean, I can send this information along, but what we know is that not everyone has access to community organizations or support systems like Jessica does, like Juan Manuel Montes with NILC and United We Dream being part of the fight there. And so we actually don't know how many of these cases have happened and under the guise of the night with which Donald Trump's agents operate. But we do know is that this has been a constant theme, at least in the immigrant youth movement, where we are saying this is happening to us, we are being deported, these are injustices are happening to us, and then it is disregarded and said, oh, it's a small number of people and it's sort of like the outliers. But what we have done and will continue to do is be able to shine a light on the deep impact that some of these shifts have caused. And this is how we want DACA, and this is how we will maintain DACA and make sure that it's strengthened. So I would say that those are some cases, but that it's definitely not. We don't believe that they're outliers.
Okay.
And Julia, this is Lorella. Just briefly, because I think that there is what is happening in the courts, but in general, there is a need for them to answer some really important questions here in the courtroom and outside of the courtroom, right? If she doesn't have a felony conviction, if their standard for review hasn't changed, they haven't published any updated Q&A on their website, if they're not targeting DACA recipients, then why aren't they moving to reinstate Jessica's DACA today? Right? Why do we even have to go to court? And so these are, I think, critical questions that Secretary Kelly needs to answer. And had it not been for attorneys intervening on Jessica's behalf, right, they would have gotten away by going out to the press and trying to claim that she's a convicted felon. And so, there aren't necessarily lawyers for every DACA recipient that might be experiencing this on the ground. So we want the community to be vigilant and to ask for help if they think that they are being targeted by ICE and or CBP.
Okay.
Okay, great. Next, we'll move to Miriam Jordan with the New York Times. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. Actually, Julia asked a question that was also on my mind. Can you just repeat that? You said that 408 DACA recipients have been removed. Since when? Since January 20th?
Yes, since the last time that DHS released numbers, which was I think January of this year. So I can get you the data sets if that's helpful to you. I'll make sure that I can follow up.
And you said that 90 are currently in detention?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll move to Mauricio Guerrero with the Mexican News Agency. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. How important is Jessica's case in terms of setting a precedent in courts for other DACA cases? Could this set, so to speak, the guideline for the courts to decide on cases that are similar to Jessica's? Thank you.
Thank you. This is Michael again. I think Jessica's case is very significant for all the reasons that the other speakers on the call have discussed. Basically, the case boils down to a very basic principle, which is the government has to follow the law. The government can't go out and simply revoke Jessica's DACA based on this bogus allegation that she's a convicted felon. If the government could do that, that would effectively mean they have discretion to do whatever it wants. And that's not how the law works. The law requires that federal agencies make decisions, reasoned decisions based on facts, and not take arbitrary actions that upend the lives of people like Jessica for absolutely no reason. So I think the issues are very significant in her case, and given the concerns we've had as we learn about cases where people's DACA was similarly potentially stripped unlawfully or without justification, what happens in court tomorrow, will be very, very, very significant for people in Jessica's situation.
Yeah, this is Gracia. What I would add is that, we're looking at, ever since the election of Donald Trump, there's been a question about, what happens to the DACA program. And he thought that he answered it when he said, there should be, they should rest easy. But what we know now is, the key areas that we're looking at, where there has been some shift, is on what is the detention of immigrant young people. And that's where you see the case of Daniel Ramirez in Washington State and the work that United We Dream is doing there. That is to be able to help us answer that question. What happens when immigrant young people that have DACA are detained? On DACA adjudication, this is a case to watch to ensure that we get an answer for the Trump administration on how they're going to process our applications and whether they're going to just renew the rules of how they do that. And then on deportation is the third piece, which is where the NILC and the NILC's work and United We Dream's work on Juan Montes's case, that's where we will get answers on what happens when immigrant young people with DACA are deported. And so there's still a lot of questions. Secretary John Kelly is not answering any of them, and I think that there's a lot of people like ACLU, United We Dream, and NILC and others that are demanding those answers, and we'll fight to make sure that we do.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to Laura Meckler with the Wall Street Journal. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Thank you. I have two questions following up on points you just made. One is, and excuse me if you said this earlier, I missed it, when you said that there are 408 DACA recipients who've been removed in recent months and 90 in detention. How does that compare to numbers during a similar period of time during the Obama administration? Because there were DACA people removed before Trump as well. So how do you have some context for that number? And the other question I have is, you said that, Michael, I think you just made the case that the government cannot just remove people, essentially arbitrarily, that they have to follow the rules. But is that really true with DACA? Since DACA is not a program that was passed by Congress, it was an administrative action. They could just get rid of the whole thing if they wanted to, and there's always been a degree of judgment as to who it applies to and who it doesn't. So is it whether it's good policy or not is one question, but is it against the law for them to decide this person, for whatever reasons, is not worthy of this program?
Yeah, on the data set piece, so those are those are the current numbers that we know of. They have not provided a breakdown of how many of those came from the Obama administration and the Trump administration, and that's why we believe that ICE needs to be able to answer these questions. How many have you detained throughout the last 6 months? How many of them have been deported? What were the reasons for them being deported? Those are the answers that we're seeking, because I want to be able to tell my little sister what she should how she should navigate the world. She's a DACA recipient as well, and so I think that in this new Trump era, we just need to have as much information as possible. And ICE agents under Trump, DHS under Trump are not giving us answers.
So you don't know how many people were at a similar period of time, say a year ago, what those numbers would have been?
Well, we have the numbers that are currently detained. We don't know how many of those were already detained by the Obama administration.
But how many were currently detained a year ago? There was a certain number who were in detention.
Yeah, I can follow up with that, and as we pull up the USCIS reports from and NICE reports from last year. So that's another next step for us.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Michael again. So it's of course true that the administration could get rid of the DACA program, but the important fact here is that they haven't, and nothing has changed about the program's rules. And, you know, it's a principle of black letter law that agencies have to follow their own policies. So as long as DACA is in place and those rules have remained unchanged, the government has no business going out there and saying Jessica is somehow ineligible for DACA, disqualified from DACA, not even entitled to a look at her DACA application because she supposedly has a felony conviction. You know, there are very clear rules about who is and isn't eligible for DACA because they're an enforcement priority. Having a felony conviction could disqualify you from the program. She doesn't have one. So, you know, so long as those rules are in place, she's entitled to fair consideration of her DACA application without that thumb on the scale.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll move to Laura Rodriguez with Hoy Chicago. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi. This is the question for Jessica's friend. I believe her name is Claudia. I was wondering what sorority are they a part of?
The name of our sorority is Lambda Theta Alpha Latin Sorority. It's a Latina sorority.
Mm-hmm. And what chapter is it at
the chapter in Kennesaw, where Jessica's from, is the Epsilon Alpha chapter.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, you may do so by pressing the star and 1 on your touch-tone telephone. If your question has been answered or you wish to be removed from the queue, simply press the pound key. Again, that is star and 1 on your touch-tone phone. We'll pause momentarily to allow further questions to queue. And at this time, we have no further questions. I'll turn the call back over to our presenters.
Thank you so much, Tony, and thank everyone for joining today's call. We will be following up possibly after tomorrow, and as the case continues to move forward. I want to close the call, but just by really putting the ask out for the government, right? That the DHS reinstate Jessica's DACA. We have the facts. We also have all of the background material on the filings, and I think that we can expect to see more activity about this case in the following weeks. Thank you again for joining today's call. Have a good day.